Hello. Hello, my favorite people. I'm sure as hell not your favorite people right now, at least because I know that I'm late, very, very late, and I'm incredibly sorry for that. Um, hello. I'm finally here. I'm sorry for the lateness. I'm sorry for not being on time lately, or really for some of you ever, because you joined recently, and that's all you really know from me is the fact that I never show up to lives on time. I'm very sorry. I'm working on it. I'm having a little bit of a um, you know just mental health situation. Nothing serious, but just sort of trying to get myself into a position in which I can be on time for things. Hi, Ostapchik. Hi, Sky. Hi, Lauren. Hi, Gap. Hi, Praxis. Hi, Carolyn. Hi, Elliot. Hi, Casanova. I'm sorry if I missed someone. I don't mean to do that. I just, things fly very fast in the comments sometimes. Hi, Poverty Barn. Hi, Juju. Hi, Veronica. Hi, everyone. There's quite a little bit of news today. There is a lot of speculation online about Bakhmut, and I'm not going to add to it. I am just going to clarify something. There's quite a bit of interesting little things that happen that have no confirmation, nor did anyone really, nor did anyone really provide more, more facts about them. But basically, there have been explosions in Mariupol, and quite. Hi, Otenbot. Hi, Albert. Hi, Grumpy. Hi, James. Hi, Juju. I don't know if I said that already. I think I did, but an extra hi never hurt nobody, right? So basically, what I was going to say is that there have been lots of very small, weird little updates. And one of them is that there have been severe explosions heard in Mariupol, which honestly, there is, I don't even. Sorry, one second. I wouldn't even know where to begin to speculate on that one, because Mariupol is occupied by Russia. Mariupol is severely destroyed. There is really not that much of Russian equipment and Russian warehouses in Mariupol unless we don't know about them. And if there were explosions, there are likely explosions that have been inflicted by the Ukrainian side, and they would be on Russian military infrastructure, which would then mean that they have moved their equipment and their ammunition to Mariupol, which I'm incredibly confused by that, because as I said earlier, Mariupol is over 85% destroyed, and most of the warehouses, schools, or places big enough to house equipment and ammo are not there anymore. So, that's quite strange. Grumpy is saying, weren't the Russians building a big base there? Yes, but that would take time. And as everything with Russians, they don't know how to do things quickly. And if they do, they make them kind of out of cardboard and paper. It's when you look at Mariupol and when you look at those videos from Russians where they're like, look, we are renewing Mariupol. Look at this beautiful block of apartments. So most of those apartments don't have working electric, working water. The walls are paper thin. They're quite literally made out of cardboard. They don't hold heat. There are lots of issues with those apartments. They're not finished. The facade looks decent, but everything inside is just done the same way that you would expect things to be done in Russia, and that is through their ass. So another thing is anytime Russians are look at how we're rebuilding Mariupol, well, you wouldn't have to do that if you didn't ruin it, right? So that's not credit. I hate when people give Russians credit for rebuilding Mariupol or for building things there, because it's kind of well, they annihilated the city. Are you going to rebuild the hundreds of thousands of people that were murdered there? Because I don't think I don't think you can. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you build there because that's your responsibility to do so after you have quite literally ruined and wiped Mariupol off the face of the planet. So it's really not a merit to have built a couple of half-assed buildings in one district, you know? Anyways, and also those buildings and also apartments in those buildings are not going to be given to the citizens that lost their apartments. They're for sale. So we all know that it's going to be Russians from Bumble F nowhere coming into Mariupol and buying those apartments if they can afford to. So it's not going to be given to Ukrainians that have suffered through the from the invasion. It's not going to be given to people who actually need those. They're going to be sold to Russians. And they did say that there was like a plan to give ipoteka, which is like basically like a mortgage. It's kind of it's like the, I guess it would be like a term parallel to a mortgage in the United States. So you could buy an apartment and you could pay for it in segments over a period of time. And they're saying that this is their big, help to the people who want to buy these apartments, which is kind of ludicrous to begin with, because ipoteka and mortgages are not something that is like given to people as a special occasion. It's a normal thing. And yeah, maybe Russia doesn't do that for luxury apartments, but these don't even qualify as luxury apartments. And then also, again, that still means that these people are going to end up paying double for these apartments because they're buying them over time, so they're paying percentage. Anyways, it's ludicrous. It's another way for Russians to exploit Ukraine, to exploit the residents of Mariupol, and to exploit everybody that they have harmed. So yeah. Alrighty. We are going to get into all of the rest of the updates. For any of you who are new, especially if you're on Twitter, because I did notice that a lot of people on Twitter watch the lives, but then no one ever really comments anything or says anything, which is upsetting because, you know, I like interacting with my audience. But anyway, so if you're on Twitter and you would like to migrate to YouTube, please do so. It's very easy. It's the same handle, and also it's in my link in bio. And with that, hi, my name is Yulia. I was born and raised in Lviv, Ukraine, and I lived there until I was 16 years old, at which point 12 years ago, I moved to New York. Thank you, David, on Twitter, at which point I moved to New York, United States, and I've been living here ever since. My family lives in Ukraine. That is my immediate family. So my mom, my dad, you know, grandmas, grandpas, and my aunt, which you guys have heard a lot about because she's an amazing art professor, and her students have done this amazing collection of posters. They're too far for me to reach. I'll do it at the end of the stream. So stick around if you want to see them. And we are trying to do a collaboration with those artists to do merch in support of Ukraine, and profits will be going to the rebuilding of reconstruction of Ukraine fund for United 24. But so anyways, we do this stream here 3 times a week, and it's on Tuesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. I'm still figuring out the kinks of the schedule because, you know, I've been in a bit of an emotional funk lately, as one might be when they talk about Ukraine since February 24th without giving themselves a break. And if they're Ukrainian, and if, you know, they're directly affected by the consequences through their family. Anyways, but so we do this 3 times a week. These streams basically, thank you, Truthful, and give you all the information you need to know for the past like 24 hours and some that comes out from Ukraine and pertaining to Ukraine around the world. We give it like historical, geopolitical, and otherwise relevant context, and I try to explain it to everybody as best as I can, so no one has any questions as to what is going on and why certain decisions are made and certain decisions aren't. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. I interact with the audience all the time, and honestly, you know, I'm here to talk to you guys, so that's the whole point. And to bring you the news. So this stream is going on at 4 different platforms at the same time. That is Twitch, Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, and then TikTok. My handle is the same across all platforms. If you like one of the platforms mentioned just now on the found, you can easily my link in bio on Twitter or TikTok and find all the other platforms. Or if you are on Twitch or YouTube and would like to watch it somewhere else, you can go to the description video on YouTube, and all of my social media is linked there, or you can go to the About section. And I do highly recommend that if you're not watching me on YouTube or you're not following me on YouTube, please consider doing so, because twice a week I release The Brief, which is an under 20-minute news rundown of everything that happened in and pertaining to Ukraine in the week so far, and I do them twice a week. I'm also currently in the middle of recording another very, very cool segment, and I'm in the middle of trying to put out another very cool segment in the beginning of February, now that I kind of have my it together, because we don't curse on this channel because we don't want YouTube to not like us. And I don't know, I'm talking about myself in third form, but here we go. So also someone said hello from the Ukrainian. Hi, привіт, рада вас тут бачити. So, okay, let me say a round of, and another thing, all of your, so I quit my job which I like, I feel really bad saying, basically, because it is not your responsibility. But if you like my content, and if you want to help me continue providing it, I do have a Patreon. I do have an availability to subscribe to my lives on TikTok, and there is also a YouTube membership. I also do appreciate all of the super chats, all of the super chats, all of the super stickers, all of the gifts on TikTok. They do really go a very long way and help me fund this journey of trying to bring you quality content. So if you feel like you like my content and you would like to get a subscription, consider me a Netflix of sorts, and I will be incredibly grateful. And again, all of your super chats, super stickers, and beautiful, beautiful animation gifts on TikTok are incredibly appreciated. And also the TikTok ones, as a graphic designer, I really appreciate them because they're really pretty, and TikTok finally has increased the percentage of the gift amount that they give to creators. So with that said, Slava Ukraini, what's happening in the world? We're getting to that right away. And hi, Armin. And to Chris Kieft, who's asking, do you still do Zooms? Yes. So every first, third Thursday and Saturday of the month, we do Zoom calls on Patreon, and for those of you who are subscribed to the YouTube membership. And I will be posting a link to the tomorrow, because it is about to be the first Thursday of the month, because for some reason I thought it'd be next week, but oh hey, we know I'm not very good at scheduling. But I will see you there on Thursday, and I will post a link and you guys can plan around it. But basically it's 8:30 p.m. on Thursday of Eastern Standard Time, and then it's 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday. So that should be good for people who are in Europe on like London time, for instance, or Ukraine time. That'll be evening for you guys. Okay, so with that said, let's dive straight in. We are going to discuss a couple of things that have been, how would I say this, on the news in the past couple of days. So NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has confirmed that DPRK, which is the Republic of North Korea, helps Russia with missiles, which is something that North Korea avidly denies, while also saying that they will always support Russia and they will always stand with Russia on the same battlefield. So it's kind of funny that they're saying they're telling that Ukraine is telling Ukraine that we're out of line for saying they supply weapons to Russia. It's also funny that they keep saying that the United States is out of line for blaming them for sending weapons to Russia. Meanwhile, Maxar technologies do exist, and satellite imaging is very easy to obtain these days. And there is a plethora of evidence that North Korea does supply weapons to Russia. And it's quite funny that they're denying it, provided they all say that they stand with Russia and they will always support them by all means available. So it's like, an oxymoron of sorts, and I really don't see the point of them making up this cover story, because, well, they are now the second most sanctioned country in the world after Russia, but it's like there's hardly anything else that the world can do to sanction them further, because they've already been incredibly sanctioned. So it's not like it really changes the picture for them. So I don't know why this facade, and I don't know why this charade. I guess to surprise the world with the super duper uber, sorry for this choice of language, modern weapons that they're providing to Russia that will help it on the battlefield. And by that I mean like World War II relics that barely work, because according to multiple reports, the weapons that North Korea does have and is supplying to Russia, they are and in even worse shape than those that Russia has themselves from World War II. So at least there is that. Okay, Russia deployed new military units to Belarus for training, according to State Border Guard Service of Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky and Prime Minister of Denmark, Mette Frederiksen, visited wounded soldiers in Mykolaiv. It is important that our soldiers are able to undergo not only physical but also psychological rehabilitation. Many thanks to all medical workers who protect the health of our defenders, said the president of Ukraine. Why do they, if Russia is such a superpower, why do they need missiles from North Korea, says Jillian. Well, I mean, of course, because they're a superpower and they want to support North Korea by using their missiles and giving them such honor, right? If you're fighting for your home, you will become a super soldier. Yeah. So Russia says Russia is saying you guys have super soldiers. I say if you're fighting for your home, you will become a super soldier. That's right, exactly, and that's as I've said multiple times. That's why Ukrainians learn how to use this all of this new technology as fast as we do, because we have a high stake in this, and that's our survival, our country, our homes, right? The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine has already signed 16 contracts with Ukrainian companies for the production of drones, said the head of the ministry, Oleksiy Reznikov. This year, 20 billion hryvnias, about $5 million, will be spent on the purchase of drones, he added. So in the photo here, this is a Ukrainian drone named Shark. So we have been having issues with obviously with drone production, with with drone deliveries. There are not enough of them, and drone warfare is one of the most important parts of the war right now, because the war in the trenches is quite outdated, and drone warfare is the future of warfare, which is crazy because I can't believe that we have to use terms like the future of warfare in 2023, but alas. So drone warfare is right now incredibly important. That's how Ukraine makes a lot of gains. Also, drones, not only combat drones that are important, but also surveillance drones. But those are much more available and much easier to buy, much easier to manufacture. So we are trying to have our own production of our own drones that are combat drones, so we are able to supply them for ourselves. And as I've said before, if Ukraine doesn't have something, we just invent it and we solve the problem. And I talk quite a bit about it in my latest brief. So if you are on YouTube and you haven't watched it yet, then you should check it out. I posted it this morning with a bit of a delay. It was supposed to go up yesterday, but we had a few hiccups on the way. And if you're not on YouTube, then get on YouTube and check out my latest brief, because it's super informative. I explain how many Russians really protested and how many of them really got apprehended, what Hungary and Belarus are doing in order to aid and abet the Russian invasion, and many, many more things. So, and all of it under 20 minutes. How convenient, right? Huh? So anyways, if you're not on YouTube, if you haven't watched it yet, please give it a try. It is, in my humble, not biased opinion at all, very good. Okay, Russia's preparing for a new offensive and will again try to capture the whole of Ukraine, says Jens Stoltenberg. Putin has not changed the main goal of the war, and Russia plans to mobilize more than 200,000 soldiers, actively acquire new weapons and more ammunition, increase its own production, and buy a lot of weapons from other countries, NATO Secretary General said. Challenger tanks will arrive at the front line in Ukraine by summer or May this year, says British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace, which is this is a pretty rapid timeline if you think about it, because that is quite fast. But the problem is that Russia is planning an offensive in spring, and Ukraine was planning to launch an offensive in spring as well. And so having those Challengers and having most of the modern tanks arrive at the end of the spring is not quite ideal, because we need that technology as soon as possible to be able to make significant changes and on the battlefield, and to be able to really make a dent in returning back the territories. But one of the good things is that before, if you were to listen to the U.S., especially listen to the European leaders and the U.S. And the U.S. leaders, right? A couple of months ago, all of them were saying a hard no on tanks. All of them were saying a hard no on jets. And at some point, each unit of modern technology for Ukraine was a no, which makes no sense because it's really not escalation, it's de-escalation. Because if we have that technology and we're able to stop Russia, how can they escalate, right? It's an oxymoron of thinking, and I really don't understand it. And I really, really like this whole idea of like, we're not going to send this to Ukraine because that's going to escalate things with Russia kind of pisses me off. It pisses me off to the point of no tomorrow. And I can't even eloquently express it because at this point, how do you not see it? Sending modern technology to Ukraine that will help Ukraine defeat Russia will de-escalate the war, not escalate it. Because how can Russia escalate the war if they are being defeated and they can't handle the pressure? But not sending all of this technology to Ukraine helps Russia make gains and helps Russia kill more people and helps Russia prolong the war. So it's really counterintuitive and counterproductive. And this excuse is honestly one of the most garbage excuses I've heard from the world leaders in the war thus far. And it really pisses me off to the brim of no return. And I'm like so tired of, trying to say this in like a nicer way. But anyways, the same thing was with Crimea, right? When all of the officials were saying, well, Crimea is going to escalate things with Russia. It's like, well, Russia escalated things when they invaded Crimea. Crimea is not their territory. Crimea is an internationally recognized part of Ukraine. And if you think that not returning Crimea is somehow going to keep Russia at bay, then not returning Crimea is just going to give Russia an impression that they can get away with things, and then they're going to take a breather and then invade Ukraine again like they did in Chechnya. There were two wars, and the first one Russia lost. The second one, Russia, you see what is going on with Chechnya now. Also, and speaking of Chechnya, I want to bring up a story that's not really on the news, but that I posted on my Twitter, and I kind of want to explain something to you that not many people talk about. But so, as we all know, Kadyrovite Chechens are they're known as these like incredibly brutal, inhumane, awful fighters. And a lot of the crimes that have been committed in Ukraine have indeed been committed by them. But so, the other weekend in Melitopol, which is Zaporizhia Oblast, a correspondent from NTV, which is a Russian propaganda channel, and her cameraman went to Melitopol to record a propaganda piece. But so her cameraman was beaten up brutally by Chechens, and she was assayed by them. And she was forbidden to talk about it on the news, and she was forbidden to make this story public in order to not discredit the Russian army. And now there is a lot of, there are a lot of people, especially Russians, using this story to paint themselves as victims and Chechen fighters as perpetrators. So as we know, Russia really likes to blame their minorities. And I have heard a lot of the times from Russian creators, and I'm not gonna name names, but I've like spoke out against these creators numerous times. And as I said before, I think any Russian that speaks English to an English audience is really not doing it with good intentions, because good intentions would be to talk to Russians, not to English-speaking people, because Ukrainians can talk to English-speaking people about what's going on in Ukraine. But I digress. Anyways, there are lots of these Russian creators, and I've heard verbatim from one of them in the comments reacting to something that Chechens did in Bucha, reacting to something that the Russian army did in Bucha and saying, well, those are Chechens. They're basically underhuman and they're different. As Gen Z would say, we don't claim them. Well, honey bunny, here is the reality that I'd like to tell you, because I also know that you still somehow stalk my profiles, even though I've blocked you months ago everywhere, but then you keep finding me on other social medias. So I guess if you're still not tired of stalking me, I would like to tell you this, and to everybody else. So here's the thing. Russia allowed Chechnya to become what it is. The Russian president placed Kadyrov in power and let him exercise all of his theocracy, all of his executions, all of his torture, all of his laws in Chechnya. And Russian people never had any issues with it. They never said anything. They've never protested against it. They've never done anything. Specifically, if you were to protest against Putin, yes, sure, maybe that, even though I just did a brief explaining why that's also BS. But if you thought that Kadyrov is so awful and Chechens are so awful and he's breeding this ground of these inhumane, sexually violent people and stuff like that, then why didn't you protest against Kadyrov? Surely Putin would change a leader if that leader was tarnishing his reputation. Surely, because Putin is the man above Kadyrov, right? Also, you can't just consistently take Russian crimes and blame them on Russian minorities, because you're all in Russia and you're all a product of Russia. And it's not just Chechen people who are brutal. Yeah, they're very much known for being brutal. Yeah, Russia quite often only lets stories about Chechens, Buryats, and Dagestanis to go through the media, so Russian people think and blame only the minorities. But you all have been equally as brutal in Ukraine. Every single crime that Kadyrovites have done, Russian soldiers have done as well. And you can hear that through Russian soldiers quite literally talking to their families on those recorded intercepted phone calls. Yeah, exactly. And Mark says Wagner Group. Wagner Group is not Kadyrovites. Wagner Group is not Chechens. I'm sure there are some Kadyrovites and Chechens in Wagner, or rather Chechens from Russia who are not like Kadyrovites. And I'm sure there are a bunch of other Russian minorities and nationalities that serve in that are contracted with PMC Wagner. But every single one of Russian soldiers, whether they be purely Russian, ethnically Russian, or whether they be a minority or anyone else, has done the same amount of brutalities. And I understand that it is very convenient to try and separate the two and be like, oh, but Chechens are the brutal ones and the Russians are, the victims of this. No, you're not. You're the perpetrators, and you can't consistently keep placing the blame on someone else. You're all equally as responsible. You're all participating in this war, and you're all committing the same amount of war crimes. It's just the difference is that Russian TV wants this to be the difference, because they want you to continue hating minorities. They want you to continue feeling superior. And that's why all of these crimes that you see through the lens of a Russian are always portrayed through minorities, because they want us to hate them and they want you to hate them. But newsflash, all of you are doing an equal amount of damage. And please stop using this as, oh my gosh, look, poor Russian correspondent got attacked by Chechens. Sure. You know how many poor Ukrainian correspondents got attacked by Russians? Let's talk about that maybe. But this just proves that, you're getting a little bit of that Russian culture that you so try to defend. I don't see why you're so upset. Anyways, that's my little, 2 cents that I wanted to give, because I'm so freaking tired of seeing these ways, these really disgusting, nauseating ways that Russians are trying to justify themselves and their actions, and these ways in which they're trying to paint themselves as victims, where they're the perpetrator, by quite literally using and abusing minorities and just blaming them in everything that happens. So I had to say this. France and Australia agreed to supply Ukraine with 155mm artillery shells, defense ministers said. The first deliveries are scheduled for the first quarter of 2023. Iran suspects Ukraine of being responsible for attack on ballistic missile warehouse in Isfahan. It says that a high-ranking political source in Tehran told reporters that Ukraine is among the potential culprits. Yeah, because we don't have anything else to do other than attack Iran, out of all things. Well, first of all, that makes no sense, because I don't think we have weapons that could reach Iran. But that's besides the point. Of course, Ukraine is among the potential culprits when you're trying to be Russia's main ally. The U.S. Transportation Command delivers the first batch of Bradley combat vehicles to Ukraine. Woohoo! It's not a tank, it's a tank destroyer. The shipment, which contained more than 60 Bradleys, left the shores of North Charleston, South Carolina on January 25th. So here's the thing about Bradleys. Bradleys are not a tank. They are, as American officials said, a tank destroyer. So they are meant to do exactly that. They're meant to destroy tanks. They are very hard to penetrate. They're incredibly useful in the battlefield, and they are it's going to be very, very hard, if not impossible, for Russians to destroy them with the technology that they have. So they have nothing to kind of protect themselves against the Bradleys. And for the Bradleys, it's going to be incredibly easy to destroy Russia's super outdated Soviet tanks. And yeah, and they're fast, as Veronica says. US President Joe Biden says the United States will not supply Ukraine with the F-16 military aircraft requested by Kyiv. So, no, Biden replied. And he replied that as in, he replied that when asked by journalists whether he supported the delivery of the planes, which Ukrainian officials say are now a priority. So here is the thing. So there is this clip, which I'm going to show you, which alleges that Biden simply didn't hear the question when he was asked it. That's why he said no.
Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President.
So he seems incredibly lost there, and I do feel like he might have not heard what he was being asked. But here's another thing. So I think, first of all, Poland was so I stopped by Arvosis's live earlier today, and he was covering this topic. So if you guys were there, then I'm going to add to it. So I agree with him. There were way too many countries talking about the fact that they would love to supply Ukraine with F-16s. That was the Netherlands, that was Poland. There were a couple of other countries, and now it seems like all of these countries kind of like backtracked in their word and are just like, nope, we're not going to do that. No, that's against our that's against our moral code of warfare conduct, right? Now, take this into account. Ukraine is preparing an offensive, and the US asked Ukraine to not do any moves until all of the equipment that the US promised Ukraine arrives in Ukraine. So I think that there is a very high likelihood. Oh, thank you so much for the star. I really appreciate that. So there is a very high likelihood that the reason why the countries are saying that they wouldn't consider transferring fighter jets to Ukraine is in order to divert attention. Now, let me make it very clear, and I like to do that. It is just my opinion based on what I've been seeing, but this is what I think. I think that the reason why they say that is because they don't want Russia to know. They don't want Russia to know that they would be sending F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine, because those would be incredibly decisive in the battlefield, and that would give a severe air advantage. Because no matter how many MiGs we're going to get sent, Russia will always have more, right? Unless somehow there's like an unbearable amount of and not unbearable, oh my gosh, unless there is like some unknown amount of MiGs found in other countries and they can outdo Russia in those. But still, Russia has a lot of them, and Russia has a lot of the potential to attack from them. And if we have F-16s, we do have air advantage. And telling Russia like, oh yeah, Ukraine is going to get F-16s is only going to get Russia to prepare for that and plan and account for it. Telling Russia that no, Ukraine's not going to get modern jets. Why would we give Ukraine modern jets? Don't worry about it. Proceed as you were planning on it. That gives Ukraine a severe advantage, not only in the air, but also in information space and in PSYOPs, because Russia is simply not going to expect that. And it just wouldn't make any sense that all of these countries would be talking specifically about providing Ukraine with jets and then just act like they never did the next day. And especially because the Ramstein meeting that's going to happen in the next few weeks in February is going to be all about air superiority. Oh, also GDLS missiles, long-range missiles, were just approved for Ukraine, so that is a huge hit. Those missiles have wings. Those missiles are not just like HIMARS. Those missiles are incredible, and that is going to give us very big advantage in striking the Russian rear. So yeah. Um, let me see. So Politico says that NATO wants to extend the mandate of Secretary General Stoltenberg for another year due to the war in Ukraine. According to publication sources, the option to keep Stoltenberg is currently the best option. In order to elect a new Secretary General, the consent of all 30 member states is required. Hungary. However, other sources say that there is a desire for a breath of fresh air in the alliance, but in the current environment, NATO members may want to play it safe and keep Stoltenberg. I think they will because there has been a lot of speculation on that cause. Oh, thank you so much, DW. Thank you so much, Dwight. Oh my gosh, I can't see anything. I'm so sorry. But I think there is a huge possibility that they're going to keep Stoltenberg. There has been a lot of speculation in that subject. There was speculation that Boris wants to run to be NATO Secretary General. Thank you, Kat. There has been speculation that so many quite random, unqualified politicians are going to try and run to be NATO Secretary General. Don't get me wrong; like I do appreciate that Boris used Ukraine for his own PR, but with that kind of helped us a lot. But at the same time, he would be a horrible NATO Secretary General. That he's not qualified to be in that position, and I I would not want that to happen. Thank you so much, Kat. Thank you so much, and thank you, Dwight. I really, really appreciate that. But yeah, so I frankly, I don't see how that would help anybody. But Jens Stoltenberg is very good at doing his job. He has been a very stable unit within NATO. I think he is pretty good at what he does. He has a lot of respect. Lots of people like him. And I think that keeping him for the time being and not making major moves while there is while there is literally a conflict the scale of World War II happening worldwide would be a smart decision. But again, we never know, and we will see what NATO wants to do. But I think that keeping Stoltenberg is the right move. But that's just me. I understand everything about the breath of fresh air and everything, but also NATO going through a major transition during this war is exactly something that Russia would be just loving to happen. Yeah, I know that. Jillian says Boris is in Washington right now. Yes, Boris is going to be advocating to the Republicans why they should be supporting Ukraine, and obviously, if anyone can find mutual language with the Republicans in America, that would be Boris Johnson. Because let's be real, they're cut from the same cloth. Boris is just like has a little better reputation worldwide about this time because of his stance on Ukraine. But yeah. So Bear Claw is asking, will Ukraine move into Crimea with these new tanks? So, I mean, we can't move into Crimea until Mariupol is liberated and until Berdyansk and those cities are liberated. So there would first need to be an offense in the south and to reclaim the territories that have been taken over in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, and then we could move to Crimea. We are planning on taking back Crimea, and we will take back Crimea, but that's going to be one of the that's going to be one of the operations that is going to have to be like planned times and times and times over. And it's going to be one of the largest scale offensives that we have seen in this war, because there are so many Russians infiltrated in Crimea. There is the naval fleet in Crimea. Crimea is like a very pivotal point. To someone's asking, where did I get this sweater? My mom gave it to me. My mom gave it to me. It used to be her sweater. I really like it. Then someone asked me if I live with my parents. Well, provided that I live in New York City and my parents live in Ukraine, I'll let you guess. The international human rights organization Human Rights Watch said that the Ukrainian military threw thousands of banned anti-personnel mines at the Izum area, causing civilian casualties. The organization demanded an investigation into the use of PFM mines, pedal mines. The report says that Ukrainian troops mined areas near Russian military facilities, while Russians are actively using anti-personnel mines everywhere. Ukraine is a state party to the 1997 Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention, which completely prohibits the use of such weapons. Russia refused to sign the treaty. So it does look like there is some speculation and there is some attempt to frame Ukraine in doing something that Russia might have done. On the contrary, I'm not going to comment a lot about that because there is not much that has come out about the story, and I have to keep an open mind, and I have to say that there is a possibility that Ukraine is in fact doing something like this because there is not much information right now. But also knowing how these campaigns work and knowing how Russia pays off these international humanitarian organizations, Amnesty, wink wink, to say incredibly controversial stuff that implicates Ukraine and things that we don't do, I would say that there is a very high chance that this speech has been paid by Russia. Oh my gosh. Yeah, truth. In Ukraine, when we oh my gosh, we have this thing in Ukraine that when you sneeze after saying something, it means it's the truth. So look at that. How timely, in very timely fashion. Anyways, thank you guys. Everything you don't like is Russian propaganda. No, that's not true. I don't like some rude people. I don't think they're Russian propaganda. I don't like that Russians are destroying Bakhmut. I don't think that's Russian propaganda. I don't like stuff that is literal Russian propaganda because I know how it works and I know how they infiltrate governments and I know how much of Russian influence there is. And also, there is 145 million of them and a lot of them are rich because of the kleptocracy that's going on there. And so a lot of the kids of Russian oligarchs, people adjacent to the kids of Russian oligarchs, they live in the US and they're on boards of major organizations, and they do that. So yeah, I really don't like that. No, I don't like Russian propaganda, but not everything I don't like is Russian propaganda. However, a lot of it is, and it's really easy to tell. So I'm very sorry that you and your buddies are doing your job so low quality that, people like me can easily tell you. Maybe instead of blaming me and easily figuring out what has been paid for by Russia, maybe do your job better. Have you tried that? Because see, I'm doing my job well. I see when Russian propaganda is happening and I see when Russians are involved. You, however, can do a job good enough for me to not see that. So who's losing here? Yeah, thought so. Thank you so much, ETM. Thank you. Okay. The BBC showed the Eurovision Song Contest 2023 logo and slogan. The song contest will be held in Liverpool under the slogan United by Music. And the logo depicts hearts beating together. The logo uses the Penny Lane font, which is a reference to the song by the legendary Liverpool band The Beatles. So this is what it looks like. And let me remind you that Ukraine won Eurovision, and technically the contest should have been held in Ukraine, but obviously it is still an active war zone and would not be safe. So it's being held in England, in Liverpool. So it's kind of cool, and it's very nice that they're paying tribute to Ukraine and saying United by Music to show solidarity. I really like that. Norway promises to supply Ukraine with Leopard 2 tanks by the end of March. The country's defense minister said that the exact number of tanks is still being determined. Norway has 36 tanks of this model. Greece has a lot of Leopards. And Greece has a lot of leopards. The Netherlands are willing to buy leopards for Ukraine, but buying leopards means that it's going to take time for Germany to be able to manufacture them, and they're not going to get to us until like 2024. And however, Greece has like, I want to say it's in the hundreds of leopards. That's their main battle tank, like main battle tank. But Greece has some threats coming in from Turkey. So they might be hesitant in giving those tanks to Ukraine because of that. Although both Greece and Turkey are in NATO. So I don't think Turkey would be able to attack Greece without any consequences. I think that Turkey would be done with. So even though it is a scary situation and Turkey has been like, having well, Turkey should not be in NATO with the amount of like terrible stuff that they do. But that's a separate subject. There is the situation in Cyprus. There is the situation in with Greece. There is a lot going on there, but I do want to say that I don't think that Turkey would be able to attack Greece, provided that they are in fact in NATO, and they would be done with. They can't just go ahead and do that. Okay. Yeah, good night, Natabot. Okay. Chief of Main Intelligence Directorate Kirill Budanov believes that this year Russia will focus on the occupation of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. He calls a renewed offensive from Belarus unlikely. Such a move would only demonstrate the intention to distract the defense forces. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine reacted to the words of the Croatian president, who said that Ukraine will never be able to return Crimea. Foreign Ministry spokesman Oleg Nikolenko said that he had actually called into question the territorial integrity of Ukraine. He reminded Zoran Milanovic of the 1990s when Croatia could have lost a third of its land during the Balkan Wars. The day before, Milanovic called the occupied Crimea Russian, the Revolution of Dignity a coup, Western support for Ukraine in the war against Russia deeply immoral, and also threatened nuclear war if Russia loses. Okay, Croatia, well, that's a way to discredit yourself and make enemies around the world. Just spewing Russian propaganda and supporting a genocidal maniac. Yep, that's the way to go, Croatia. Very glad to see that you're really thinking about international relationships. International relations, that's big of you. Austria and Hungary agree not to send weapons to Ukraine. How interesting that the Austrian-Hungarian Empire that occupied Ukraine before World War I and Lviv, where yours truly is from, is largely built by the Austrian-Hungarian Empire and has a lot of Austrian-Hungarian architecture. Our Opera Theater is the exact copy of the Viennese one, just scaled down so it's smaller. And how odd that the two countries that used to occupy a significant part of Western Ukraine would not support Ukraine by giving it weapons. Well, Hungary also has its own intentions. And by the way, again, if you haven't watched the brief, you should watch it, because there is an explanation as to why Viktor Orban, outside of just being, a communist, fascist, sort of like, Soviet-loving, pseudo-dictatory kind of person who just loves Putin because they're made out of the same cloth. There is more reasons to that as to why he has Hungary block aid to Ukraine and sanctions to Russia that are to his personal gain. So if you haven't watched the brief, you should, and you'll find out. Anyway, Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda said that we need to stop drawing red lines and give Ukraine the necessary weapons. Yes, I like quoting him because, he says a great deal of the things that are right. Currently, 326,000 Russian troops are fighting in Ukraine, said Kirill Budanov. According to the head of the GUR, this figure is approximate. Budanov also said that Russia has about 9% of its stockpile of Caliber C cruise missiles. Ukraine will receive up to 140 Western tanks in the first wave of contributions from international partners, according to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dmytro Kuleba. Occupiers shelled a residential area in Bakhmut. A man and a 12-year-old boy were killed. 5 people sustained injuries of varying severity. France announced the transfer of 12 Caesar self-propelled artillery units to Ukraine, according to the French Defense Ministry. And France will send 150 specialists to Poland to train 600 Ukrainian soldiers. Cindy, what are you doing, babes? Okay. British fighter jets are extremely complicated, and it takes months to learn how to fly them, said Rishi Sunak. This was stated by the press secretary of the British Prime Minister. According to him, this is why the transfer of aircraft to Ukraine is inappropriate, but this issue will be further discussed with the allies. See, here's the thing. At some point, Western things were far too complicated for Ukraine. Okay, at some point, Abrams was just unsustainable to have on Ukrainian battlefield. At some point, HIMARS was a big deal. At some point, javelins were a big deal. At some point, all of these weapons were a no. At some point, there were excuses to deliver all of these weapons. I maintain that I think personally, which is my opinion, not a fact, that fighter jets will be transferred to Ukraine, and this is just either another stalling technique to not overwhelm us with, the right amount of stuff that we need to win, or it's just a diversion tactic, so Russia doesn't know that there is aircraft that will be transferred to Ukraine and doesn't expect it. Latvia will not participate in the Olympic Games together with Russia and Belarus if the aggression in Ukraine continues at the time of the Games. Привіт, Poltava. So here is an interesting thing. So the Olympic Committee is letting Russian athletes participate as long as they're not promoting their countries and as long as they're not supporting the war, which is a lot of the athletes they're permitting to be in the Olympics have supported the war at one point or another. So harsh criteria. Anyways, they can lie too, and Olympics bring them lots of money. So, and sponsorships and stuff like that, and kind of clean their reputation, But so they're letting Russians participate in the Olympic Games. And a lot of the countries like Sweden and their skiers have issues with that because no one thinks it's appropriate to let Russians compete, even if they're not directly promoting Russia or wearing a Russian flag. So, yeah. So absolutely not. I fully stand with that. And thank you, Latvia, for standing in solidarity with us and refusing to participate if Russian and Belarusian athletes are going to compete. Alexei Reznikov said what I just said. All types of weapons from Western partners initially went through the no stage. Commenting on the issue of fighter jets, the minister recalled that this was the case with HIMARS and tanks, but Ukraine eventually received them. Therefore, he believes in the aircraft coalition in the future. Reznikov explained that each military aid went through no, let's discuss, explore possibilities, prepare crews, and arrival. And yeah, that's very true. So the UK government is close to transferring 2.6 billion from the sale of the Chelsea Football Club by Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich to a humanitarian aid fund for Ukraine. So this is interesting. Roman Abramovich sold Chelsea and was trying to be so sweet about it, right? He was like, I'm a good Russian. I'm going to give the funds to Ukrainian charities. I'm doing this for Ukraine. But in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Roman Abramovich transferred all of his, 2 weeks before that, transferred all of his assets into the trust funds of his children. Why? Because you can't access them, you can't freeze them, and it further complicates basically confiscation of Russian assets if they were to be sanctioned or he was to be sanctioned. Then he was trying to play like a mediator or intermediary with the negotiations with Russia, because obviously he's a big part of Russian propaganda and he's not a good Russian, by no means. And these assets, in fact, from the sale have been frozen, and they have been kept in a closed account for 8 months, but now government officials are finalizing the paperwork. However, the decision still needs to receive final approval from the EU as Abramovich remains under sanctions. So, yeah. So he's playing a very interesting game here. The United States has no evidence of misuse of U.S. funds in Ukraine. The U.S. Treasury is satisfied with the assurances from the Ukrainian authorities, but continues to work with the authorities to properly prevent corruption. Also, again, if he had a heads up to transfer his funds to a safe and secure location, then he knew about the invasion of Ukraine. He didn't do anything. So he's not, not on Ukraine's side. Former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson will lobby for aid to Ukraine among representatives of the U.S. Republican Party. He will convince lawmakers. I love how it's not like he will try to convince, it's he will convince. He will convince lawmakers to continue supporting Ukraine. Johnson will meet with a group of Republican senators this week. Yeah, I mean, I've said that before. It's a great PR move for Boris. Here's the thing. I'm really grateful for everything that Boris has done for Ukraine, right? But let's be real. He did that because he wanted to gain the support of the people in the UK that he was so rapidly losing. And also because he had no other choice, because the people in the UK support Ukraine, right? And at the end of the day, he has to do what pleases the people. But also, it's a brilliant PR move because now Boris Johnson, who had a terrible reputation after Brexit, and who had a terrible international reputation after like all of the failed, just his failure as the British Prime Minister, now is a respected figure worldwide again. So great PR, Bojo, great PR. In Kharkiv, fragments of a dead woman's body were recovered from the rubble of a residential building hit by a Russian missile on January 29th. As of 4:30 p.m., the second day of rescue operations and the residential building destroyed by an enemy missile has ended. The rescuers managed to dismantle most of the emergency structures and clear a significant part of the debris under which the fragments of the deceased woman's body were found on the 4th floor. Partner countries issued a statement on the creation of a special international tribunal for Putin and his war crimes in Ukraine. As chairman of the foreign affairs committees of our respective parliaments, we support the creation of a special international tribunal, said David McAllister, chairman of the European Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee in a tweet. And there is 16, 12, 15, 18, 20 countries that signed onto that statement. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said it was necessary to increase support for Kyiv. The reason for this was an analytical report on the course of the war, which showed that the Kremlin was benefiting from the protracted conflict. As a result, London will revise its support policy so that Ukraine has more resources to win the war as soon as possible. Fighter jets. Don't tell me I told you so. I won't tell you I told you so when that happens. But okay. Kherson is under fire again. The U.S. is preparing a $2.2 billion arms package for Ukraine that includes longer-range missiles, and those are GDLS. And those, in one of my briefs, I showed the GDLS missiles in the weapons delivery sections. Those are beasts. They are, I believe, 120 to 150 kilometer range, and they are incredibly, they are beasts. Those are beasts. They have wings, okay? Wings. Anyways. And here is example range. Okay, one sec. Here is an example range of GLSDB. Too many letters. So this is an example range. Okay, oh, sorry. Let me show it to YouTube first, and then I'll show it to TikTok. Boom. Large range is going to attack Russians from back. In the rear, speak. Oh, there was a sound, and I thought something happened, and then nothing happened. Okay. Possibility in the coming weeks, Russia is preparing for maximum escalation, an SDC secretary tells Sky News. That's Alexei Danilov. Russia is preparing for maximum escalation. It is gathering everything possible, conducting exercises and training. And to conclude, we're going to go with a healthy little dose of Russian madness. So, the creator of Rybar channel, who now has a live TV program, admits that Russian VDV forces lost 50% of their personnel by September last year. I love Russians accidentally saying they should say cronies are going to be on his doorstep wrong in life. Okay, so Praxis says you say that you once say I told you so, but 90% sure that listen, Listen, I do not exclude any possibilities. I'm not a fortune teller, you know? I don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Многие говорят про то, что воздушно-десантные войска на фронте не видно. К сожалению, это объективная реальность. К началу, получается, мобилизация у нас примерно воздушно-десантные войска лишились 40-50% штатного состава. То есть сейчас частей получается, ну как сказать, строевых с штатным вооружением, которые вот старые проверенные десантники, их осталось не так много.
Oh, audio dropped. Oh, sorry. I don't know what happened. I pressed on it. Oh, YouTube didn't hear me. Oh no. Oh, I thought I was being so funny. I said the one time that Russians said the truth. You know, it's like, hey, so you know our Air Force, the one that we brag about so much, the great Russian Air Force. Yeah, so the people who are actually trained to be in the Air Force, most of them are not alive anymore because Ukraine took them down, but we didn't want to tell you that, you know, because the great Russian Air Force, and now they're not there. So yeah. And I wonder how many doors, windows, and other staircases, and you know, their own homes, and many obvious so many of those you know, particularly popular methods of self-unaliving in Russia. I wonder which one of them he'll choose. Self-unaliving in Russia. So all that stuff about the jet loads of VDV getting shot down was legit. Yeah, it was. Yeah, the Ukraine took down Ukraine's Air Force wasn't like super strong, right? As in, like, we didn't have a lot of force, because that has been killed by Yanukovych back in the day. But the people that we did have did an incredible job, and they took down so many Russian planes. And hi, Julian. Good to see you. In this case, oh my gosh, that's so funny. Okay, so Armin, did you post your quote of the day? Did I miss it? Did I miss Armin's quote of the day, guys? Because we have arrived at that very sad time of the newscast. I know this is when, you know, when I have to leave, and well, rather when I don't have anything else to say, unless you have questions to ask, then I'll answer them. But you know, I'm sure that you're just so disheartened by the fact that this is ending and you don't have to hear my beautiful voice anymore. But for those of you who are new, if you are not on YouTube, please find me on YouTube. If you're on TikTok, you can search me up on, well, you can press the play button next to my profile picture. You can go into my link in bio. If you're on Twitter, you can go into my link in bio as well. If you are on Twitch, you can find it in the about section, or you can just look me up by the same handle because it's the same everywhere. But if you're not there, you should find me, because I do a lot of good stuff on YouTube, and there is only going to be more. And YouTube is a very, very good resource. So let me see. Also, way less trolls on YouTube, although they have been mobilizing, which makes me feel like I'm doing something right. Okay, Armin. Hello. So I see a hello from Armin, so that can't be the quote. Right, let me find it. Oh, okay. There we go. Winston Churchill warned about appeasement when he said, each one hopes that if he feeds the crocodile enough, the crocodile will eat him last. All of them hope that the storm will pass before their turn comes to be devoured. But I fear greatly that the storm will not pass. It will rage, and it will roar even more loudly, ever more widely. Tyrants can't be appeased. Tyrants must be destroyed. Yeah, and that's basically, that's what I keep telling you guys every time that we have streams, because you can't like, not giving Ukraine aircraft or tanks or what it is that we need to stop Russia is gonna exactly do that, not stop Russia. But giving us what we do need is going to give an opportunity of stopping Russia. So it's like you can't think that you're going to escalate by providing Ukraine the weapons that are going to give us the ability to take them down. Escalating is not giving Ukraine the ability to stop Russia. And this like logic is so faulty and so stupid. And again, I agree with something that Arvosa said today. Like all of those people who are like, "Oh, why are you promoting the war? Why are you like supporting Ukraine in the war?" It's like, well, because if we don't, Ukraine is gonna cease to exist, and people are gonna be tortured and killed continuously as they are already. And and we're just going to let Russia do whatever Russia wants. So like, what do you mean? War is the only option here. And it's like this logic that's really hard to counter because it's designed to be that way. It's designed to be like, well, why are you supporting the war? You're just prolonging the war. Like, sure, we're also prolonging the survival of Ukrainian people. Because had we not been supporting Ukraine, Ukrainians would probably not exist anymore as a nation. So what, we just let that happen because, I don't know, you don't like wars? Like, we don't either. Newsflash, Ukrainians don't like the war either. Like, we would love to be able to survive as a nation and not have our families and friends killed while not having to be a part of warfare. You think that Ukrainian men and women like to be on the front lines, risking their lives and like losing their brothers, mothers, fathers, sons, sisters? No, we don't. But that's our only option. Like, you think we just willingly want to continue on dying? No. So yeah. Oh, hi, Deb. And bye, Not a Botter. It was good to see you. But yeah, so that's all I had for you for today. Let me check one more thing here, and then I'm happy to answer your questions if you have any, or suggestions if you have any. I am going to... One second. Sorry, guys. So yeah. Okay. Sorry. And Russia blames why it really started. Oh, thank you, Melissa. And I've talked about why it really started a million times. There are so many videos on my profile because of years and years of history, centuries of history, and also because Putin wants our resources. Because Russia doesn't necessarily have anything to show for itself, but Ukraine does. And what's your opinion on Code Pink? So Code Pink is it's like a women-led grassroots organization, and they are anti-war and anti-militarism, and they're pro-peace and stuff like that. I mean, here's the thing: like, everybody's a pacifist until war comes to their home. And then when it comes to your home, you stop being a pacifist because you understand that the side that invaded you is not going to stop, and that you need weapons and you need militarism. Like, I would love if we lived in the world in which warfare was not a solution, but because really terrible people in charge of really, really big countries with lots of military resources have the ability to attack other countries, warfare is necessary because there is evil. And until the evil is stripped of its military power, there has to be counter military power. Because I don't believe in this garbage of like, oh, world peace and like anti-militarism. Yes, anti-militarism for let's work harder to strip North Korea, Russia, and like places, Turkey, places that have invaded other countries before. Places that have disregarded sovereignty of other nations, places that have committed genocides. Let's work on stripping those of military equipment and military potential. And then When that's there, then we can discuss the anti-militarism and anti-warfare. But unfortunately, the places that get invaded need to be able to defend themselves. Ukraine is not promoting the war. Ukraine is not promoting the war. Ukraine is not promoting, weaponry and fighting. Ukraine is defending itself. We have never attacked anybody. We have only ever really defended ourselves. And to any bots that are going to start talking about Bandera and Volhynia and all of this stuff, it's like, read some history. Ukraine was occupied by Poland. Ukraine was occupied by Austrian-Hungarian Empire. I love Poland. I love my Polish friends dearly. And I know that Polish people say that Lviv was originally a Polish and now it's Ukrainian, but you were met with resistance when you came to Lviv. If you were met with resistance, then it wasn't Polish. So let's do that. And it is now Ukrainian, it has always been Ukrainian, and we have always identified as Ukrainian. So no matter what you want to say, we consider that occupation. But we are way past that, and we're friends now. But at the same time, at that time, the people were fighting for the independence of the country that continuously kept being invaded, occupied. Hydrocarbons, I haven't been able to see it yet. I've been in such a funk and I've been so out of it, but I will watch it. Like, I have time tonight to pay attention to like the world in general, but I've been in such a like funk. I've been going through some, like emotional stuff that's not like anything bad. It's just, at some point you kind of start losing your sanity when you do this 24/7 and you just kind of like need an emotional break. So I've been trying to take that emotional break, and I've been trying to pay more attention to my dog and do nothing, because I realized, well, I know this about myself, but when I care about something, I do it to 100. So I have been like going on and on nonstop, and I need to start, doing some things for myself, like finally doing a month worth of laundry that's been just sitting here. Yes, I work through the day. So I don't I work on this, right? But it's like, that's the thing. I think that a lot of people assume that videos and lives are the only thing I do, but there is an incredible amount of like behind the scenes of interviews, planning of interviews, of planning of things that I can't talk about yet, because they're not like, they're not straightened out. Straightened out yet. So I have no liberty to say, but I'm trying to figure all of that out, and I'll give you updates as soon as I can. I'm also trying to figure out a merch situation now with amazing artists who are supporting Ukraine, who are students, so we can do like a cool merch line that's really cool, and you will actually like to wear it, not just buy it because you want to support Ukraine. And we will donate through the sales of that to Ukraine. So there is a lot of cooking behind the scenes, a lot of things cooking behind the scenes, and I'm really, really excited. Okay. How is the power electricity situation in Ukraine, your area? So I'm in New York City, and I've been living here for the past 12 years. I was born and raised in Lviv, Ukraine, and I lived there until I was 16. My family lives in Ukraine, and my dad has now been added to the third group of power outages. So now him and my grandmother have constant power outages. I don't think my mom is quite in the third group. I think she's in the second. But basically, yeah, everybody is suffering from electricity outages, but my family has this perspective on it. Basically, look, we've had full electricity for such a long time. Like, we are lucky, right? And the rest of the country has had rolling blackouts all the time. So it really is like not a big deal that they're getting power outages now. But yes. Okay. Alrighty, guys, I gotta run because I'm incredibly hungry and I can hear my stomach talking to me. Thank you so much for all of your contributions. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for chatting. Thank you for interacting. And thank you for listening to my voice and not getting tired of me after almost a year of hanging out on my live streams. And thank you for all of your gifts. Thank you for all of your contributions. Thank you for all of your subscriptions to the Pranya, thank you for all of your subscriptions to the TikTok lives and to the YouTube membership and to my Patreon. I incredibly appreciate that, more than you know, and I am excited to see you soon. There is going to be a new brief on Thursday morning, and I hope very much, if I can, that in between that I might release the breaking news brief. I just don't want to overwhelm. I don't want to overwhelm the feed, but I am going to eat first. Yes, cat. Okay. I will say I will tell John a thank you, and I will tell him that you guys are you speak very highly of him. So I will let him know. Alrighty. Bye guys. It's good to see you. Bye.